The chamber floated high above a massive gas giant called Velrath. It was built from crystal that glowed with soft blue light. 12 alien species sat in tall chairs arranged in a circle. Looking down at the single human who stood in chains at the center, Ambassador Park Do-yen was 63 years old. His hair had turned silver many years ago, and deep lines marked his face from decades of smiling at beings who never smiled back. He had served humanity for 30 years, traveling from world to world, trying to build friendships with species who saw humans as nothing more than useful animals. Today, those efforts had brought him here. To his death, High Arbiter Molketh floated at the highest seat. His body was not made of flesh and blood like a human. Instead, he was a shifting collection of geometric shapes that folded into each other endlessly. When he spoke, his voice came from everywhere at once. Human Ambassador Park Do-yen, you stand accused of violating sacred expansion law. 7. Your species established a colony on Kepler 4-4 to be without permission from this council. The boundary was clearly marked. You were warned 3 times. You ignored us. Do-yen looked up at the alien shapes and colors surrounding him. Some of these beings had bodies like insects. Others looked like walking trees or floating clouds of gas. All of them stared at him with what he had learned to recognize as contempt. High Arbiter, he said, keeping his voice calm and respectful. The colonists on Kepler 4-2b were refugees. Their original world was destroyed by a solar flare. They had nowhere else to go. We asked the council for emergency permission to settle them, but our request was denied without explanation. The law does not allow for exceptions, Molketh replied. Boundaries exist for a reason. If we allowed every species to expand whenever they wanted, the galaxy would fall into chaos. They were families, Do-yen continued. Women, children, old people who had lost everything. All they wanted was a place to live in peace. Kepler 442b was an empty world. No one was using it. No one wanted it. We thought you thought wrong. Molketh's geometric shapes twisted into sharper angles. Humanity has been part of this galactic community for only 80 years. You are infants compared to species who have existed for millions of years. Yet you constantly push against limits. You question our decisions. You act as if you deserve the same respect as your elders. Around the chamber, other representatives made sounds of agreement. A being made of crackling electricity flickered brightly. An enormous slug-like creature oozed satisfaction from its pores. Do-yen had heard these words many times before. Humans were always described as young, foolish, and arrogant. It didn't matter how politely they asked for things, or how carefully they followed the rules. In the eyes of the council, humanity would always be the newcomers who didn't know their place. I understand that we are young, Do-yen said. I understand that we have much to learn. But I believe that this council valued life. I believed that you would show mercy to innocent people who were suffering. Mercy is for equals, Molketh answered. You are not our equals. You never will be. The words hung in the air like poison, far away on Earth. A room full of people watched the transmission in terrible silence. The chamber was buried 3 kilometers beneath the Swiss Alps, protected by layers of rock and advanced shielding that could survive a direct nuclear strike. Admiral Yoon Jisoo stood at the front, her eyes fixed on the screen. She was 46 years old, born in the same year that humanity first made contact with alien life. Her entire career had been spent preparing for a moment she had prayed would never come. Beside her, Defense Secretary Kang Min-ho gripped the edge of the console so tightly his knuckles had turned white. Behind them, generals and scientists and world leaders watched in horror as the alien shapes on the screen began to glow brighter. The sentence for violation of Sacred Expansion Law 7 is death, Molketh announced. Ambassador Park Do-yen, you will serve as an example to your species. Perhaps when they see your fate, they will finally learn to obey. On the screen, Do-yen did not beg. He did not cry or plead or fall to his knees. Instead, he stood straighter, lifting his chin with quiet dignity. I have one final statement, he said. Molketh's shapes flickered with annoyance. Speak quickly. Do-yen looked directly into the camera that was broadcasting his trial across the galaxy. He looked at Earth. He looked at Admiral Yoon and Secretary Kang, and all the billions of humans who were watching their ambassador face death. "I came to you in peace," he said. "I asked for nothing but understanding. I believed that somewhere in this vast universe there must be beings who value kindness over cruelty. Perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps the galaxy truly belongs to those who care only for power." He paused, and a small, sad smile crossed his face. "But I want my people to know something. Do not become like them. Do not let hatred consume you. We are better than this. We have always been better than this. Whatever comes next, remember who we are." He nodded once at the camera, and then the execution beam struck him. It was bright and fast. Ambassador Park Do-yeon, who had spent 30 years trying to build bridges between species, simply stopped existing. His body turned to ash. The ash scattered across the crystal floor of the council chamber, in the bunker beneath the Alps. Admiral Yoon felt something break inside her chest. It was not grief, though that would come later. It was something colder, something that had been locked away for 80 years, waiting for exactly this moment. "They're waiting for us to beg," Secretary Kang said quietly. "They think we'll grovel and apologize and promise to be good little primitives." Admiral Yoon turned away from the screen. She looked at the room full of leaders who represented all of humanity. Their faces showed shock, anger, and terrible sorrow. "Open the vault," she said. The words seemed to hang in the air. Everyone knew what she meant. Everyone knew what lay beneath Mount Baekdu, sealed behind doors that hadn't moved in 40 years. President Choi Yoon-ji, an elderly woman with steel in her eyes, stood slowly from her chair. "Are we certain? Once we begin, there is no going back." "They executed our ambassador," Admiral Yoon replied. "They murdered a man who came to them asking for mercy. They broadcast his death across the galaxy as entertainment. Going back ended the moment his ashes touched the floor." The president was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded. Deep beneath Mount Baekdu, in a facility that officially did not exist, ancient machinery began to wake up. Lights flickered on in tunnels that had been dark for decades. Computers that had been sleeping activated their systems and began running programs. That would change the galaxy forever, the council thought. They had taught humanity a lesson. They were about to learn that. Humanity had been teaching itself a very different lesson for a very long time, for 80 years. Humanity had played a role. They smiled when aliens insulted them. They accepted unfair trade deals without complaint. They bowed their heads and said, "Yes, of course, and we understand and thank you for your wisdom," while the older species laughed at them behind their backs. The galaxy saw what it wanted to see. Harmless humans. Weak humans. Humans who were grateful just to be allowed to exist. Among the great civilizations of the stars, none of them ever wondered what humans did when no one was watching. The facility beneath Mount Baekdu stretched 4 kilometers in every direction. It had been built in secret over 40 years, using technology that the council had never been told about. Every gram of material had been mined from asteroids in deep space, processed in hidden stations, and transported to Earth through routes that avoided all. Council monitoring. Admiral Yoon walked through corridors that hummed with power. Secretary Kang followed beside her, along with a young woman named Baek Sujin, who wore the uniform of a lieutenant commander. At 32, Sujin was the youngest person ever granted access to this place. "We called it Project Prometheus," Sujin explained as they walked. "Named after the Greek god who stole fire from heaven and gave it to humanity. The council sees themselves as gods. We decided it was time to steal their fire." They entered a massive chamber filled with holographic displays. Screens showed star maps, fleet positions, and data streams flowing from thousands of sources across the galaxy. In the center of the room, a command platform waited like a throne. "The Annihilation Protocol has 3 tiers," Sujin continued, activating the displays with a gesture. "Each tier builds on the one before it. Together, they represent everything we have learned about our enemies over the past 80 years. Secretary Kang stared at the screens. "Show us." Sujin nodded and began the briefing. Tier 1 is communication disruption. The council uses something called quantum entangled relay networks for instant communication across the galaxy. Every species depends on it. Military commands, trade agreements, banking systems, emergency services, everything goes through the network. She brought up a map showing the relay stations. They formed a web of light connecting every major world in Council space. We spent 40 years mapping every single node in their network. We placed monitoring devices on relay stations. We recorded their encryption codes. We learned exactly how their system works. She paused, and we built kill switches. Kill switches? Kang asked. Hidden programs buried deep in the relay software. On our command, every quantum entangled communicator in the galaxy will stop working at the same moment. The Council will lose the ability to talk to each other. Fleets won't receive orders. Governments won't be able to coordinate. They will be completely isolated. Admiral Yoon nodded grimly. Continue. Tier 2 is economic collapse. Sujin changed the display to show mining operations scattered throughout Council space. The entire galactic economy depends on a material called neutronium. It's the only substance that can safely contain antimatter reactions, which means it's required for building faster-than-light engines. Without neutronium, no one goes anywhere. I know about neutronium, Kong said. We process most of it through human-controlled stations. The Council allowed us to handle their refining because it was dirty work they didn't want to do themselves. Exactly, Sujin smiled, but there was no warmth in it. They thought they were using us as cheap labor. They never asked why we were so eager to take the job. She zoomed in on one of the processing stations. Every piece of neutronium that passes through our facilities is infected with nanites. Microscopic machines too small to detect with standard scanning technology. The nanites are dormant, harmless, until we send the activation signal. What happens when they activate? Admiral Yoon asked. The nanites alter the molecular structure of the neutronium. It becomes inert, useless. Every ship, every station, every piece of technology that uses neutronium will stop working. Their entire civilization will grind to a halt. The room was silent. The scale of what Sujin was describing was almost impossible to understand. Entire species would be crippled. Trillions of beings would be affected in Tier 3, Kong asked quietly. Sujin's face became very still. She changed the display one more time, showing a map of the galaxy dotted with red markers. There were hundreds of billions of them. We call them harvesters. Admiral Yoon stepped closer to the display. Explain. Self-replicating autonomous weapons. Each one is about the size of a human fist. They're made from common materials that can be found on any asteroid, which means they can reproduce indefinitely as long as they have raw material. The red markers, Kong said slowly, those are their current positions? Yes. We've been placing them for 20 years. Hidden inside asteroids, disguised as mining equipment. The Council inspected our operations regularly, but they never looked too closely. Why would they? We were just harmless humans digging rocks. Sujin let the number sink in. 400 billion harvesters spread throughout Council space, waiting silently in the dark. On activation, the harvesters will emerge from their hiding places and begin consuming military targets. Defense platforms, warships, weapons factories. They will take apart everything the Council has built to protect themselves, and they will use the raw materials to build more harvesters. What about civilians? Admiral Yoon asked sharply. The harvesters are programmed to ignore civilian targets. Schools, hospitals, homes, they will not be touched. Sujin met the Admiral's eyes. Ambassador Park believed in mercy. We built that belief into our weapons. President Choi Yoon-ji had entered the chamber quietly during the briefing. She stood at the edge of the platform, listening to everything. Now she spoke. Well, this is what we have become. A species that prepares for genocide while pretending to be friends? No one answered. The weight of her words pressed down on everyone present. They gave us no choice, Admiral Yoon finally said. We asked to be treated as equals. We asked to be respected. We followed their rules, accepted their insults, and tried to prove ourselves worthy. and they responded by murdering our ambassador on live broadcast. She turned to face the president directly. We didn't want this war, Madam President, but we prepared for it because we knew that one day they would push us too far. That day has come. President Choi was quiet for a long moment. Outside this room, across the planet Earth, billions of people were watching the recording of Ambassador Park Do-yeon's execution. They were crying. They were angry. They were demanding justice. Activate Tier 1, she said. Soo-jin turned to the command console. Her fingers moved across the controls with practiced precision. Across the galaxy, hidden programs buried in relay stations received a signal they had been waiting 40 years to receive. Tier 1 activated, Soo-jin reported. Estimated time to complete network collapse, 6 hours. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the first quantum relay station went silent. Then another. Then 1,000 more. The Council had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. Their rule was about to end. High Arbiter Molkith had ruled the Galactic Council for 300 years. In all that time, he had never experienced true fear. Why would he? The Council commanded fleets that could burn planets to ash. They controlled technology that younger species could barely understand. They were the masters of the galaxy, and everyone knew it. The first sign that something was wrong came exactly 6 hours after the human ambassadors. Execution. Melkith was in his private chambers aboard Velrath Station. When his communication display flickered and died, he assumed it was a simple malfunction. Such things happened occasionally, even with Council. Technology. He tried to contact the station's technical division. Nothing. He tried the emergency military channel. Silence. He tried reaching the Council's capital world, using the priority quantum relay reserved only for high arbiters. Dead air. For the first time in 300 years, Molkith felt a cold sensation spreading through his geometric body. He moved quickly through the station's corridors, past servants and guards who looked just as confused as he felt, till he reached the central communication hub. The room was in chaos. Technicians of a dozen different species were running between consoles, their voices raised in panic. Status displays showed nothing but error messages. Report, Molkith commanded. What is happening? The station's chief communication officer, a four-armed being named Vethrek, turned to face him. Hi, Arbiter. I don't understand it. The entire quantum relay network has collapsed. Not damaged. Not disrupted. Collapsed. Every node across the entire galaxy at almost exactly the same moment. It's impossible, Molkith said. The network is built with thousands of redundancies. A failure of this scale cannot happen naturally. No, Vethrok agreed quietly. It cannot. The words hung between them like a death sentence. Across the galaxy, the same scene was playing out on every Council world. Ships lost contact with their home ports. Military commanders found themselves unable to reach their fleets. Governments discovered that they could not speak to their own colonies. On Draxion Prime, the homeworld of the Draxian sovereignty, Arbiter Representative Gellin stood in her command center and watched her empire go dark. The Draxians were proud warriors, a species that had never been defeated in battle. Their fleet was the largest in the galaxy, and now she couldn't reach a single ship. Send runners, she ordered, using a word that hadn't been spoken in Draxian military commands for 10,000 years. Physical messengers and fast ships. We need to know what is happening. Her aide, a young officer named Threll, hesitated. Arbiter, our ship's navigation systems depend on the relay network for positioning data. Without it, calculating safe hyperspace routes will take days instead of seconds. Gellin felt her scales tighten with a fear she had never experienced before. Are you telling me we are trapped here? Not trapped, Threll said carefully. But any journey that would normally take hours will now take weeks. We are effectively isolated. The word tasted like ash in Gellin's mouth. On the trade station at Nexus Crossroads, the busiest commercial hub in known space, merchant ships from 100 species suddenly found themselves stranded. Without communication, they couldn't confirm deals. Without navigation data, they couldn't plot courses. Without banking connections, they couldn't transfer credits. Captain Oyuna watched the chaos from the observation deck of her freighter, the Soldan. She had been operating in council space for 15 years, pretending to be just another human trader trying to make a living. In reality, she was one of hundreds of human agents embedded throughout the galaxy, waiting for this exact moment, her personal communicator. Using a frequency the council didn't know existed. Received a single message, Phase 2 in 30 minutes. Yuna gathered her crew quietly. There were 12 of them, all human, all trained for this day. They moved through the station toward their ship, their faces calm while aliens ran past them in panic. What about the others? Her first officer asked as they walked. The other human traders on the station? They received the same message we did, Yuna replied. Every human in council space knows what's happening. They know what comes next. They reached their ship and sealed the airlock behind them. Around them, the station's lights flickered as power systems began to fail. Navigation is ready, her pilot reported. I have a course plot. Ed to Sector 7 rendezvous point? We can be there in 6 hours, Yuna nodded. Take us out. The Soldan slipped away from Nexus Crossroads, just as Phase 2 began. Chief Engineer Ro Taeyong had spent 5 years working at the Council's primary shipyard on Nesarok. He was considered one of the best neutronium specialists in human space, which was exactly why the Council had welcomed him. They needed his expertise to keep their ships running. They never suspected that his real job was to watch and wait. When his personal communicator buzzed with the Phase 2 signal, Taeyong was in the main engineering bay, surrounded by council technicians who were still trying to understand why their communications had failed. His supervisor, an insectoid being named Threx, clicked his mandibles nervously. Engineer Ro, perhaps you have some insight? Your species has always been skilled with technology. Taeyong looked at the neutronium power cores that filled the bay. Hundreds of them, each one worth more than a small planet. Each one about to become worthless scrap. I think, he said slowly, you should prepare for things to get much worse.
Ow.
The nanites activated across the galaxy at exactly the same moment. Trillions upon trillions of microscopic machines, embedded in every piece of processed neutronium, began their work. On Dezarak, the power cores flickered once and went dark. On Draction Prime, the great warships hanging in orbit suddenly lost power and began to drift. On 1,000 worlds, 1,000,000 stations, 10 million ships, neutronium stopped working. Engines died. Life support systems failed. The entire technological foundation of Council civilization simply ceased to function. Threx stared at the readings on his console, his compound eyes wide with shock. This is impossible. The molecular structure is changing. The neutronium is becoming ordinary metal nanites, Taeyong said. What? Nothing. He removed his council identification badge and dropped it on the floor. I need to go now. Good luck, Threx. You're going to need it. He walked out of the engineering bay while Threx was still trying to process what he had said. By the time anyone thought to stop him, he was already aboard a small shuttle, heading toward a rendezvous point where human ships were waiting. On Velroth Station, High Arbiter Molkith finally received a message. It came through a primitive radio transmission, a kind of signal that traveled at the speed of light instead of jumping instantly across space. It took hours to arrive, but when it did, every functioning display in Council space showed the same thing. Admiral Yoon Jasu's face filled the screen. Her expression was cold and calm. You executed Ambassador Park Do-yeon, she said. He came to you in peace. He asked for mercy. You gave him death. Molkith's geometric form flickered with something that might have been fear. Now you will learn what humanity is truly capable of. Your communications are gone. Your economy is destroyed. Your technology is failing. And we are just getting started. The transmission ended. In the silence that followed, Molkith understood something terrible. For 80 years, humans had smiled and bowed and accepted every insult the council threw at them. For 80 years, they had played the role of harmless newcomers. It had all been a lie. They had been waiting, planning, building weapons that the council couldn't even imagine. And now, when the council had finally pushed them too far, they had revealed what they truly were. Not prey. Pretending to be predators. Predators. Pretending to be prey. And the hunt had just begun. The asteroids began to move. Lieutenant Kim Nari watched the activation sequence from the bridge of the command carrier Indomitable. The ship was massive, larger than anything the Council had ever seen humans build. It had been constructed in secret, in a shipyard hidden inside a hollowed-out moon at the edge of explored space around her. Officers worked at their stations with calm efficiency. They had trained for this day for years. Every procedure had been practiced until it became automatic. There was no panic, no hesitation. Only focused determination. All harvesters are now online, Nari reported to Admiral Yoon, who watched from the command platform at the center of the bridge. 400 billion units across Council space, awaiting targeting parameters. Admiral Yoon studied the tactical display. It showed the entire galaxy, with red dots marking every harvester swarm and blue dots marking Council military installations. The blue dots vastly outnumbered the red ones. But the blue dots were about to disappear. Confirmed targeting protocols, Yoon ordered. Military installations only. Defense platforms, warships, weapons manufacturing facilities, command centers. Confirmed, Nari replied. Civilian targets are excluded. Population centers, medical facilities, food production, and life support infrastructure will not be touched. Yoon nodded. Ambassador Park believed in mercy. We will honor his memory. She took a deep breath. Begin the operation, Nari transmitted the command. Across the galaxy, the harvesters received their orders and began to wake. On Draxion Prime, first harvester swarm emerged from an asteroid that had been orbiting peacefully for 20 years. The Draxians had scanned that asteroid many times. They had found nothing suspicious. Just rocks and ice and a small human mining operation that paid its taxes on time. Now the asteroid cracked open like an egg, and millions of silver shapes poured out into space. Each harvester was about the size of a human fist. It had no visible weapons, no engines, no obvious means of propulsion. It moved through space using a gravity manipulation technology that the Council had never discovered. Sliding silently toward its targets, the Draxian orbital defense grid was the most powerful military installation in the galaxy. 6,000 platforms, each one capable of destroying a small moon. They had protected Draxian space for 10,000 years. They lasted approximately 4 hours. The harvesters didn't attack the platforms in any traditional sense. They simply landed on them and began taking them apart. Molecule by molecule, component by component, the platforms were disassembled. Their materials were absorbed by the harvesters and used to build more harvesters. By the time the Draxian military understood what was happening, the defense grid was gone, and the harvester swarm had grown from millions to billions. Arbiter. Representative Gellin watched from her command center as her world's defenses vanished. Her screens showed the silver shapes moving through space, ignoring civilian stations and passenger ships, focusing only on anything that could be used as a weapon. Can we fight them? She asked her military advisor. With what? He replied, Our ships have no power. Our weapons won't fire. We are completely defenseless. Ashkelon slammed her fist against the console. There must be something we can do. There is one option. The advisor hesitated. We can surrender. The word felt like poison, but Gellin knew he was right. Whatever the humans wanted, fighting them was impossible. The only question now was whether surrender would save her people or merely delay their destruction. Captain Sung Hoonwoo commanded the human observation team on Thesserek. His shuttle was cloaked, invisible to Council sensors, hovering high above the capital city while the harvester swarm did its work. Below him, The great shipyards that had built Council warships for millennia were being systematically dismantled. The process was almost beautiful in a terrible way. Silver shapes moved across massive structures like water, and wherever they touched, metals simply ceased to exist. Council's military capacity is decreasing faster than projected, his sensor officer reported. At current rate, they will have no functional weapons within 72 hours. What about civilian casualties? Hyun-woo asked. 0 so far. The harvesters are avoiding all civilian infrastructure. There was one incident where a family's personal ship got too close to a military target, but the swarm actually moved around them. Hyun-woo nodded with grim satisfaction. The harvesters were working exactly as designed. Deadly to military targets, harmless to everyone else. Sir, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth. President Choi Yoon-ji's face appeared on the main display. Behind her, Hyun-woo could see the war room in the bunker beneath the Alps. Admiral Yoon stood at her side. "Attention all human forces," the president said. "I am about to broadcast a message to Council Space. I want every human to hear it first." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "But we have one. The Council's ability to threaten us has been destroyed. Their communications are gone. Their economy is in ruins. Their military is being taken apart as I speak. In 3 days, they will have nothing left." Hyun-woo felt a strange mix of emotions. Pride in what humanity had accomplished. Sorrow for what they had been forced to become. "But we did not fight this war to destroy them," the president continued. "We fought it to protect ourselves. Ambassador Park Do-yeon gave his life trying to build peace between our species. We will honor his sacrifice by offering our enemies something they never offered us: mercy." The broadcast switched to an external transmission. Across Council Space, on every functioning display, President Choi's message appeared. "To the species of the Galactic Council, we did not want this war. We came to you as friends. We asked only to coexist. You answered with contempt, with cruelty, and finally, with the murder of a man who represented the best of what humanity could be. On Deseret, Council citizens stopped in the streets to watch. On Draction Prime, Jelaine stood frozen before her display. On Velrath Station, Molkith's geometric form went completely still. Ambassador Park Do-yeon's final act was to face death with dignity. He did not beg. He did not cry. He looked at the species he had tried so hard to understand, and he accepted that you were not worthy of his friendship. We are worthy of his memory, and so we will show you something he believed in, even at the end: mercy. Your military capability is being destroyed. Your weapons, your warships, your defense systems, all of it will be gone within 3 days. But we will not touch your civilians. We will not bomb your cities. We will not kill your children." President Choi leaned closer to the camera, her old eyes burning with quiet intensity. "When this is over, you will be defenseless. And you will remember that when humans had the power to destroy you completely, we chose not to. Ambassador Do-yeon would have wanted it that way." The transmission ended. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Lieutenant Nari watched the Council's response. Some species immediately began broadcasting surrender signals. Others stayed silent, too shocked to respond. A few tried to rally resistance, but their efforts fell apart when they realized they had nothing left to resist with. "Admiral," she said quietly, "I'm detecting large-scale civilian evacuation of military areas across Council Space. They're moving people away from targets before the harvesters arrive." Admiral Yoon allowed herself a small, sad smile. "Good. That's what we wanted. Let them evacuate. Let them save their people. Let them see that we are not the monsters they always believed us to be. What happens next?" Yoon looked at the tactical display, where blue dots were vanishing one by one. "In 3 days, the Council would have no military power. They would be completely at humanity's mercy. Next," she said, "we show them what we could have been all along. Partners instead of enemies. Equals instead of masters and servants." She turned to face her crew. "Ambassador Park spent his whole life trying to build bridges. We tore down their ability to hurt us. Now we're going to build something better in its place." Outside the ship, the The harvester swarms continued their work. Silently, efficiently, mercilessly. They took apart everything the Council had built to make war, and when they were done, humanity would have a choice to make. A choice about what kind of species they truly wanted to be. Ambassador Doyon had already made that choice for them. Now, they just had to live up to it. 1 year had passed since the execution of Ambassador Park Doyon. 1 year since the galaxy had learned what humanity was truly capable of. 1 year since everything had changed. Admiral Yoon Jae-soo, now Supreme Commander of the United Human Defense Force, stood in the rebuilt council chamber on the Sarak. The crystalline spires still glowed with soft blue light, just as they had on the day Doyon died. But the beings who sat in the tall chairs were no longer masters of the galaxy. They were supplicants, waiting to learn their fate. Representatives of all 12 council species had assembled in the chamber. Some, like the Draxians, sat with rigid pride despite their defeat. Others, like the Vorn hegemony delegation, kept their bioluminescent patterns dim with shame. In the witness section, former High Arbiter Melkith floated quietly. Stripped of his title and authority, Admiral Yoon climbed the steps to the central platform. Where the High Arbiter had once pronounced judgment on lesser species, now a human stood there instead. "The transitional period is complete," she announced. Her voice echoed through the chamber, translated instantly into a dozen alien languages. "Council military forces have been fully disbanded. Human peacekeeping fleets will maintain order during reconstruction."
Oh, yes.
No one objected. No one could. The harvester swarms still waited in the darkness between stars, ready to reactivate if anyone tried to rebuild weapons of war. "What will you do with us?" Molkith asked from his position in the witness section. His geometric shapes moved slowly and certainly, like a creature that had forgotten how to be confident. "Will you rule us, as we once ruled others? Will you take revenge for the centuries of disrespect?" Admiral Yoon looked at him for a long moment. She remembered watching him pronounce the death sentence on Ambassador Doyon. She remembered the casual cruelty in his voice, the absolute certainty that humans were nothing more than insects to be crushed when they became annoying. "No," she said simply. The chamber went silent. Commander Baek-Sujin stepped forward, carrying a data tablet that contained the reconstruction plans. She was no longer the young lieutenant commander who had briefed the War Council. A year of helping rebuild a shattered galaxy had aged her, but it had also given her a sense of purpose. "We intend to help you," she said. "Communications networks are being restored under joint human council oversight. Neutronium processing has resumed through cooperative facilities with transparent operations. Your economies are already beginning to recover." Arbiter Representative Gellin rose from her seat, her scales shifting with confusion. "You are helping us? After what we did? After we killed your ambassador and laughed about it?" Captain Sung-Han Woo answered from his position in the human delegation. He had spent the past year as Earth's senior diplomatic officer, doing the work that Doyon had once done. It was exhausting, frustrating work. Many council species still hated humans. Many still believed they were savages who had gotten lucky. But slowly, one conversation at a time. Opinions were changing. Ambassador Park Doyon spent his entire career trying to build bridges between our species, Hyun-woo said. He believed that cooperation was possible, that we could be better together than apart. We won this war for him. Now we have to build the peace he always wanted. Admiral Yoon nodded. "We destroyed your ability to hurt us. We proved that we could wipe you from the galaxy if we chose. And now we're offering you something your council never offered us, a genuine partnership. Equals working together, not masters ruling over servants." Chief Engineer Ro Tae-young activated a holographic display showing construction projects across council space. Human engineers were working alongside alien specialists on every major world. New stations were being built. New trade routes were being established. New technologies were being shared freely. "Look at what we're building," he said. "Joint research facilities on Draxian Prime. Medical centers on Tesseract using combined human and council knowledge. Agricultural improvements that will end food shortages on a dozen worlds. This is what we could have done together from the beginning if you had treated us as partners instead of pets." The chamber was quiet. For 10,000 years, the council had operated on a simple philosophy. The strong ruled, the weak obeyed. Humanity had proven itself the strongest force in the galaxy. And then, instead of ruling, they had offered to share. It was something none of the older species had ever seen before. Something they didn't quite know how to understand, Commander Kim Nari. Now promoted to full captain and commanding the peacekeeping fleet in the Tesseract system, delivered the final terms. Her voice was steady and calm, the voice of someone who had looked into the abyss and chosen not to fall in. You can accept this partnership and help build something better than what came before. Or you can reject it and remain isolated, dependent on whatever resources. You can gather on your own while the rest of the galaxy moves forward without you. She paused, letting her words sink in. The choice is yours, but we suggest you choose wisely. Humanity has a long memory. We remember those who show us kindness, and we remember those who show us cruel. Tai, her eyes moved across the assembly, meeting the gaze of each representative in turn. We also remember Ambassador Park Do-yeon. Every day, every decision we make honors his sacrifice. He believed you could be better. We're giving you the chance to prove him right. One by one, the council representatives signaled their acceptance. Gelen was first, her scales brightening as she pressed her hand to the voting panel. Then the Vorn representative, his bioluminescence flashing in patterns of agreement. Then others, and others, until every species had joined. Even Molkith, floating in his witness seat, added his voice to the consensus. I was wrong about your species, he said quietly. I believed that power was meant to be used for dominance. You have shown me another way. Admiral Yoon accepted his words with a simple nod. She didn't forgive him. She probably never would. But forgiveness wasn't necessary for peace. 6 months later, on a warm summer evening on Earth, Admiral Yoon visited a small garden overlooking the Pacific Ocean. It was a quiet place. Far from the military headquarters and government buildings where she spent most of her time, simple stone markers stood among the flowers. No grand monument. No towering statue. Just a quiet memorial where waves met shore and the sky stretched endless above. Park Do-yeon 035. 2098 HE believed in US Yoon sat on the bench facing the water. She came here every few weeks, whenever the weight of rebuilding a galaxy became too heavy to bear alone. She would sit and talk to Do-yeon, telling him about progress and setbacks, about victories and frustrations. The Draxians opened their first joint research station this month, she said. They're actually sharing their military technology now. Can you believe it? A year ago, they would have died before letting humans see their ship designs. The waves rolled in and out, marking time in their ancient rhythm. Molkith published a memoir. He wrote about how wrong the council was, how they misjudged humanity, how his greatest shame was ordering your execution. It's apparently selling quite well. People seem interested in hearing an apology from the being who tried to destroy us. She smiled slightly, imagining how Do-yeon would have reacted. He would have read the book carefully, looking for genuine understanding rather than political maneuvering. He would have tried to find something good in Molkith's words, some sign that the old creature had truly changed. That was what made Do-yeon special. He never gave up on anyone. We didn't become monsters, she said quietly. We had the power to end them, and we didn't. You would have been proud. You would have said, that's what makes us human. The young officer approached along the garden path. Ambassador Ogiwan, newly appointed and heading to the Tesseract for her first diplomatic posting. She was 30 years old, born after first contact, raised in a world where aliens were facts of life rather than science fiction. Admiral, the transport is ready whenever you are. Yoon stood brushing grass from her uniform. One moment. She walked to the stone marker and placed her hand on its surface. The stone was warm from the afternoon sun. Rest well, old friend. We'll take it from here. Ambassador awaited, respectfully, as Yoon said her goodbye. When the Admiral turned to leave, the young woman fell into step beside her. Admiral, can I ask you something? Of course. Did you ever doubt? When you gave the order to activate the protocol, were you certain it was the right thing to do? Yoon considered the question carefully. I was certain it was necessary. They killed a man who had done nothing wrong, who had only ever tried to help them. They broadcast his death as entertainment. If we had done nothing, they would have done it again to someone else. But we almost destroyed them. We came so close to wiping them out. Yes, Yoon stopped walking and faced the young ambassador directly. And that's the point. We could have. We chose not to. Every day, I wake up knowing that humanity had the power to commit genocide and decided to show mercy instead. That's not something to be ashamed of. That's something to be proud of. She put a hand on O's shoulder. You're going to spend your career trying to build peace with species that may never fully trust us. Some of them will resent humanity forever. Some will pretend to be friendly while plotting against us. Your job is to keep trying anyway, because that's what Ambassador Dojan would have done. Ambassador O nodded slowly. I understand. Good. Yoon started walking again. Now let's go. The galaxy isn't going to rebuild itself. As they walked toward the transport, the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. Somewhere out among the stars, a galaxy was learning what humanity had always known. True strength wasn't measured in the ability to destroy. It was measured in the wisdom to rebuild. Ambassador Park Do-yoon had taught them that, and they would never forget.